I forgave my cheating husband, but the revenge I chose changed everything. That's what I tell people now when they ask how I managed to smile again after what happened. But the truth is, forgiveness wasn't my first instinct, survival was. The night I found out, it wasn't a movie moment, no dramatic music, just the hum of our refrigerator, the faint drip from a leaky faucet, and my own heartbeat drowning everything else out. It was 11:47 p.m. I remember because I stared at the microwave clock until the green digits blurred. That's when I saw the message on his phone. "Can't wait to see you again tomorrow. You always make me forget she even exists." She. That was me, the wife, the ghost in his text message. Before that night, my life looked ordinary, peaceful even. I used to think that ordinary was love's highest form. Waking up to the same person, drinking coffee in the same chipped mugs, arguing about who left the toothpaste cap off. We'd been married 12 years. I met Daniel when I was 26, a small-town accountant who thought my laugh was too loud for a woman. Somehow that turned into a compliment, and later, a vow. We built a life in a neat suburban house with beige siding and a creaky porch swing. Our daughter Emma was 10. She had Daniel's serious brown eyes, but my stubborn chin. Every weekday morning, I'd braid her hair while the smell of toast and scrambled eggs filled the kitchen. Daniel would be in the living room, reading emails before work, always in that navy suit that made him look dependable, the kind of man people trusted with their taxes and secrets. I trusted him too, more than I ever trusted myself. Our weekends were quieter. We'd visit my mother, tend to the little garden in the back, and sometimes watch a movie on the couch with Emma between us. She always fell asleep halfway through. He'd carry her to bed, kiss her forehead, and whisper, "Good night, sweetheart." That was the sound of home to me. Until slowly, things started to change, in ways that only make sense looking back. The first clue wasn't a lipstick stain or a strange perfume. It was silence. Daniel used to talk about everything: clients, coworkers, what he wanted for dinner. Then, one day, he stopped sharing. He'd come home and sit in front of the TV without really watching. His phone, once tossed casually on the counter, never left his side anymore. I told myself he was tired. Tax season was busy. Men like him didn't just change overnight. But they do. I remember the first night he came home late, said he had to stay for a client dinner. I didn't question it. I reheated his food and waited, listening to the ticking clock on the wall. When he finally walked in, the smell of cologne hit me before I saw him. A stronger one than usual, sharp, unfamiliar. He smiled and said, "You didn't have to wait up." And just like that, I smiled back, because I still believed that if I stayed patient, everything would make sense again. It didn't. Over the next few weeks, his shirt smelled like a different detergent. He started carrying mints everywhere. And once, when his phone lit up, I caught the reflection of a heart emoji before he flipped it face down. That's when I started noticing how invisible I'd become in my own marriage. I wish I could say I confronted him right away, but I didn't. I folded laundry. I packed Emma's lunch. I kept living like nothing was wrong, because the alternative meant admitting my marriage was dying, and I wasn't ready to bury it yet. The night I found that message, Daniel was asleep beside me, his arm heavy across my waist. His phone buzzed again. I hesitated. I'd never been the type to snoop. But something inside me snapped. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was self-respect finally waking up. When I opened his messages, I saw her name, S. The chat went back months. Photos, inside jokes, complaints about me. She's always nagging. She doesn't understand me like you do. I feel alive when I'm with you. Alive. I remember sitting there in the dark, reading each line until my hands started shaking. The woman in those messages, she wasn't me. She was someone's secret, someone's shame. I didn't cry that night. I got up quietly, went to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. The clock still blinked 12:09 when I whispered to myself, "It's over." Not the kind that ends with screaming, the kind that comes with a cold, clear certainty, like realizing winter has already set in, and you didn't notice the first snow. I went back to bed, lay beside him, and stared at the ceiling until morning. He didn't even stir. The next few days, I moved through life on autopilot. I took Emma to school, smiled at neighbors, made dinner. Daniel must have sensed my distance because he tried to compensate, brought flowers home, kissed my forehead, told me he loved me. The irony was almost poetic. I started documenting everything: screenshots, dates, financial accounts, property papers, quietly, methodically. The betrayal hurt, but the betrayal of trusting blindly hurt more. I wasn't just losing a husband, I was losing the person who made me believe I was safe. Then one morning, after dropping Emma off, I sat in the car and dialed a lawyer. "Divorce?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "but he doesn't know it yet." My plan wasn't to humiliate him, not yet. My revenge would be quiet, deliberate, the kind that didn't make noise but left echoes, because Daniel had built his confidence on the idea that I'd never leave, and I was going to teach him what it felt like when loyalty stopped being unconditional. That was the beginning of the end, and, in a strange way, the beginning of me.
The next morning, I made breakfast like always. Scrambled eggs, buttered toast, 2 mugs of coffee, one with sugar, one without. The smell of fried onions filled the kitchen, blending with the faint chill of early spring air slipping through the open window. Daniel came downstairs, adjusting his tie, whistling softly like nothing in the world was wrong. He sat down, kissed my cheek, and said, "You're too good to me." It was strange how normal he looked, how familiar his voice sounded, how easy it was to hate him and still know exactly how he liked his eggs. That morning, while he scrolled through his phone, I watched his reflection in the glass of the microwave door. He smiled once, quietly, the corners of his lips twitching as if at a private joke. That was enough for me to decide. I wouldn't confront him. Not yet. If I screamed, he'd lie. If I begged, he'd manipulate. But if I stayed calm, I could plan. Over the next few weeks, I lived like an actress in my own home. I laughed at his jokes, cooked his meals, and asked about his day. But beneath the routine, I was building something, a quiet, meticulous plan for my exit. First, I opened a separate bank account. I started depositing small amounts: grocery refunds, freelance payments, a lost check I found at the bottom of a drawer. It was slow, but steady. Second, I gathered information about his company, the one we co-invested in years ago when things were good. It was technically in both our names, though he'd always managed the accounts. But I knew things. Passwords, contacts, clients, information he never thought I paid attention to. And third, I learned everything I could about the woman, S. Her name was Sabrina. I found out through a payment notification on his email, a dinner charge at a restaurant we used to love. The receipt was sent to their shared address, hidden under client expenses. Sabrina wasn't a stranger. She was his coworker. I'd met her once at a company picnic. She'd hugged me, and said, "You're lucky to have him. He's one of the good ones." Now, that memory made my stomach turn. One Friday evening, Daniel told me he had a business trip to Chicago. He said it casually, like he'd done a dozen times before. "Only 2 days," he said, packing his black suitcase. "I'll be back Sunday night." I nodded, helping him fold his shirts, pretending not to notice the cologne bottle he tucked carefully into the corner. A scent I'd never smelled on him before. When he left, the house felt different, lighter somehow. I sat on the edge of our bed and stared at the dent his pillow made. Then I pulled out my phone, opened his laptop, and began searching. His email was already logged in. Careless of him, but not surprising. That's when I found the hotel reservation. Not for Chicago, for a seaside resort just 2 hours away. Under guest name, 2 entries: Daniel Carter and Sabrina Lane. The confirmation email was dated 2 weeks ago. I remember the sound that escaped my throat. It wasn't quite a cry, not quite a laugh. It was something broken, something final. He wasn't even careful. That hurt most of all. I printed everything, the emails, the receipts, even their photos from social media. Then, I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers, and realized I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt awake. For 12 years, I had been the dependable one, the emotional caretaker, the woman who fixed, forgave, and forgot. But that night, I saw everything clearly. He had underestimated me. That clarity didn't come with peace right away. It came with planning. When he came back from his trip, I played my part. He walked through the door with a tan line on his wrist and a faint scent of sunscreen on his skin. I asked about his conference. He said it went well. I smiled, nodded, and kissed his cheek. And in that moment, something inside me shifted permanently. I no longer saw him as my husband. He was a project, one I would quietly dismantle, piece by piece. For weeks, I continued gathering what I needed. I started taking on freelance clients again, small bookkeeping jobs from local businesses. That gave me excuses to work late, while actually meeting with my lawyer. Together, we reviewed our finances, the business account, the joint savings, even the investment property under his name but funded by mine. We discovered discrepancies, large withdrawals made to personal expenses. When I asked the lawyer if I could move forward quietly, she said, "You have every right." So I did. I filed for divorce in secret. I kept it sealed, and while he slept next to me, dreaming his guilty dreams, I prepared the documents that would end our marriage. One night, a few weeks later, I walked into the living room and found him asleep on the couch. His phone was unlocked on his chest. I shouldn't have looked again, but I did. There it was, a photo of Sabrina, her head on his shoulder, his caption, "Finally found someone who gets me." The comments were filled with hearts, his friends congratulating him. And then it hit me. He'd already told everyone, but me. The betrayal wasn't private anymore. It was public humiliation, dressed as romance. That was the night I decided revenge wasn't optional. It was necessary. Not the kind that ruins lives. The kind that reminds someone you're not the fool they thought you were. I wasn't going to scream, or expose him online, or show up at his office. I was going to take back everything he built on my silence, piece by piece. The next morning, I made pancakes for Emma and packed her school bag. Daniel came in, humming to himself, scrolling on his phone. "Big meeting today?" I asked, smiling. "Yeah," he said, adjusting his tie. "Trying to close a deal. Wish me luck." "Always," I said. And I meant it, just not in the way he thought. because by the end of that week, his big deal would start slipping through his fingers. And I'd be there, calm and quiet, watching it all unfold.
The Monday after his so-called big meeting, Daniel left home early. He kissed me on the cheek, said something about new investors, and promised to bring home takeout if things went well. I smiled and waved from the window, the way I always did. Only this time, when his card disappeared down the street, I whispered to myself, "Good luck, Daniel. You'll need it." Because that morning, I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was his silent business partner, and soon, his biggest liability. Daniel's company, Carter & Associates, wasn't just his pride, it was his ego stitched into spreadsheets and corporate emails. But what he never realized was that the business existed because of me. I had handled the early accounting, filed the taxes, even set up their first client billing system. My fingerprints were everywhere, hidden beneath his signature. So when he started spending company money on client dinners that were actually romantic weekends, he left a paper trail I could trace with my eyes closed. The first thing I did was send a polite, anonymous tip to the firm's largest investor, Mr. Lang, an older gentleman with a reputation for cutting ties at the first sign of scandal. The email was factual, unemotional, screenshots of Daniel's expense reports, copies of receipts, and a brief note that said, "You might want to review how company funds are being used." I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. Then, I scheduled a meeting with my lawyer. We finalized the divorce paperwork, quietly initiating the asset freeze on our joint accounts. The court date was pending, but everything was moving in silence, exactly as I wanted. By the time Daniel walked through the door that evening, his company's financial controller had already been alerted. He tossed his keys on the counter, loosened his tie, and said, "Rough day. Investors are being jumpy. Can you believe someone accused me of misusing funds?" I feigned concern, placing a hand on his arm. "That's awful, honey. Maybe it's a mistake." He sighed. "Probably. People get jealous when you're successful." I smiled gently. "I'm sure you'll figure it out." He nodded, kissed my forehead, and went upstairs. He didn't notice the faint tremor in my hand as I washed the dishes, half from nerves, half from the rush of knowing I was finally in control. Over the next 2 weeks, I kept my performance flawless. Dinner on time, laundry folded, a smile always ready. If he suspected anything, he never showed it. Meanwhile, his world started unraveling piece by piece. Mr. Lang withdrew funding. 2 major clients terminated their contracts pending an internal audit. And the whispers started, the kind that spread faster than truth. Daniel came home later each night, tension radiating off him like static. He drank more, snapped quicker. One night, while Emma was asleep, he slammed his glass on the counter. "Everyone's turning against me," he muttered. "I don't know why. Lang won't return my calls. The team's panicking. It's like someone is sabotaging me." I looked at him and, for the first time in years, didn't feel small. "Maybe," I said softly, "it's karma catching up." He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" I shrugged. "Nothing. Just saying." He stared at me for a long moment. Searching, maybe, but whatever he thought he saw, he dismissed it. He always underestimated me. A week later, I made my move. I went to the office while he was out meeting clients. His receptionist still remembered me as the polite, supportive wife. She smiled and buzzed me in without question. I walked into his glass-walled office and looked around. Everything in that room screamed ownership. His leather chair, his framed diplomas, his name etched in silver on the door. I sat in his chair, turned it toward the window, and felt the weight of the moment. This was the place he'd built his empire, and now the place where I would dismantle it. I met with his business accountant that afternoon, under the guise of clarifying spousal shares. What Daniel never told anyone was that I owned 48% of the company on paper, thanks to the seed investment I made when he started it. "I'm exercising my right to liquidate," I said calmly, handing over the notarized paperwork. The accountant blinked. "Does Daniel know about this?" "He will, eventually."
By the end of that week, I had withdrawn my shares and redirected them into a trust in my and Emma's name. The company's cash flow tightened overnight. Salaries delayed, vendors called. Daniel panicked. He didn't know I'd done it. He just thought the universe was collapsing on him. One evening, he came home disheveled, his shirt untucked, eyes rimmed red. He didn't even speak at first, just stood there like a man watching his life crumble in slow motion. "They're investigating me," he finally whispered. "Someone told them I've been stealing from the company." I set down my tea and looked up, pretending to be surprised. "Stealing? That's serious, Daniel." He ran a hand through his hair. "You don't believe that, do you?" I tilted my head. "Should I?" He stared at me then, really stared. There was fear behind his eyes, the kind that comes when someone finally senses the floor beneath them shifting. For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. But pity wasn't what he needed to learn. Accountability was. The next day, I quietly delivered the divorce papers to his office. No confrontation, no tears, just an envelope, neatly sealed, waiting on his desk with my wedding ring inside. He called that night, once, then again, then again. I didn't answer. By the time I finally picked up, his voice was hoarse. Are you really doing this?" he asked. I already did. "Why now? Why like this?" I let silence stretch for a moment before answering. "Because you taught me that promises mean nothing when you don't honor them. I'm just returning the favor, with interest." He didn't speak. I heard his breath catch, then the quiet click of disconnection. That night, I slept in peace for the first time in months. The house was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the steady rhythm of my daughter's breathing down the hall. It wasn't joy I felt, it was release. But even as I drifted off, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered, "This isn't over yet." Because revenge, no matter how quietly it's executed, always leaves an echo, and his was coming.
2 weeks later, it was no longer a whisper. Daniel's downfall became a headline. I was standing in line at the grocery store when I saw it first. A small blurb in the local business column. "Carter and Associates under investigation for financial misconduct. CEO steps down pending audit." My hands trembled slightly as I folded the newspaper, placing it gently into my cart as if it were fragile. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just breathed. Because I knew this wasn't luck. It was consequence. That evening, I got a call from Mr. Lang himself. He didn't know I was the anonymous source. He just wanted to inform me, as a listed shareholder until recently, that the company was being restructured. "Such a shame," he said. "Daniel was promising once, but people forget. Reputation is like glass. Once it cracks, you can't put it back together without the cracks showing." I thanked him for the courtesy call, hung up, and stared out the kitchen window at the fading light. He was right. But what he didn't realize was that sometimes those cracks aren't a tragedy. They're the only way light gets through. 3 days later, Daniel showed up at my door. It was late, past 10 p.m. Emma was asleep, and I'd just finished washing dishes. When I opened the door, he stood there, disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, eyes sunken. The confident man I'd once married was gone, replaced by someone smaller, frightened, and strangely human. "Can we talk?" he asked. His voice was soft, uncertain. I hesitated, then stepped aside. 5 minutes. He walked in and looked around the house like he was seeing it for the first time. His eyes lingered on the family photos, the worn couch, the flowers I'd placed on the dining table. Everything was the same, except me. He sat down at the edge of the sofa, rubbing his hands together. "I don't even know where to start," I said, crossing my arms. He looked up, his eyes wet. "I made mistakes." I almost laughed. Mistakes?
Daniel, a mistake is forgetting an anniversary. You had an affair. You lied. You humiliated me. He winced, lowering his gaze. I know. He took a deep breath. I thought I was unhappy. I thought I needed excitement, validation. But Sabrina, she left me the second the investigation started. She said she couldn't deal with my drama. There it was, his karma, wearing a woman's perfume and walking away when he needed her most. I lost everything, he whispered. The company, the investors, my reputation. I don't even know who I am anymore. I studied him for a long time. The man who once towered over me now sat crumbling in my living room, drowning in his own undoing. You know what's strange? I said quietly. I used to imagine this moment. I thought it would make me feel powerful, but all I feel is tired. He looked up, desperate. Can we start over, please? I can fix things. No. It came out calm, final. You can't fix what you destroyed, and I don't want you to. I don't hate you, Daniel, but I don't love you either. Not anymore. He swallowed hard, nodding slowly. I guess I deserve that. You do, but I also deserve peace. He sat there another moment, then rose to his feet. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. I met his gaze. That's because you never really looked at me. He nodded once, eyes glistening, then walked out. The door clicked shut behind him, and the silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was cleansing. In the weeks that followed, the story of Daniel's fall spread like wildfire. His company dissolved. Colleagues distanced themselves. Sabrina, I heard, moved out of state. People called it a scandal. I called it balance. But even as the world watched his collapse, I didn't dance on the ashes. I kept my head down, focused on Emma and on building a life that didn't revolve around anyone else's orbit. I started working full-time with a local bookkeeping firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. For the first time in years, I had my own paycheck. Money I earned with my hands, not through a man's promises. Emma noticed the change too. You smile more now, she said one morning as we packed her lunch together. Do I? I asked. She nodded, her little braids swinging. Yeah, it's different, like you're not pretending anymore. I froze for a moment, the knife hovering over the peanut butter jar. Out of the mouths of children, the truth always found its way. I crouched down and hugged her. You're right, I whispered. I'm not pretending anymore. Sometimes late at night when the house was quiet and the hum of the refrigerator filled the room, I'd catch myself thinking about him. Not with longing, but with clarity. There was a time I thought forgiveness meant letting someone back in. Now I understood it meant letting them go, without hate, without need for vengeance. Because revenge might set you free, but forgiveness keeps you that way. A few months later, I ran into Daniel again, at the grocery store, of all places. He was in the cereal aisle, holding a box like he couldn't remember what brand he used to buy. He looked thinner, older. When he saw me, he froze. Hey, he said softly, you look good. I smiled politely. Thanks, you too. He hesitated. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, for everything. You didn't deserve any of it. I nodded. You're right, I didn't. But we both learned something, didn't we? He blinked. What's that? That love doesn't excuse disrespect, and loyalty isn't something you're owed, it's something you earn. For a moment, we just stood there in the soft hum of fluorescent lights, two people who had once shared everything, but now had nothing left to say. Then he smiled faintly, almost in relief, and walked away. I watched him go, then turned back to my cart. It was half full: eggs, bread, milk, and a small bunch of daisies. Simple things, ordinary things, but to me, they were symbols of peace. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like half of something broken. I felt whole.